Welcome to this series on early Americans in Oceania. This is part one, Coming to America. Now, with all civilizations, one of the first things we really need to talk about is geography. Geography always plays a very important role in the development of civilizations, and this is probably especially true when it comes to the humans that came to the Americas. Right? The first humans came to the Americas over 30,000 years ago when, during the last ice age, a land bridge was formed between Asia and the Americas known as Beringia. The most accepted scholarship on this says that they came across that land bridge in three major migrations, with the last one being around 12,500 years ago. Right now, there's other theories out there saying that they came by sea, that they didn't use the land bridge at all, that they came in one major migration instead of three migrations, and even one theory out there that suggests that the first Americans came from Europe, right? But in general, the consensus is three migrations across Beringia. Okay, geography though is going to play a big role because when that ice age ends, those water levels of the oceans are going to rise. Beringia is going to be gone, and now these first Americans are going to be cut off, right? And they're going to develop their own lifeways without influences from Asia or Europe or Africa, right? The first major civilization in this region is going to be the Olmecs. The Olmecs are often considered the mother civilization of all American cultures. These first Americans are going to have a lot of disadvantages compared to Asia and Europe and Africa. They are going to lack cereal grains, right? There's no cereal grains here in the Americas. There are no large domesticatable animals, and these are both going to play a role along with the geography, the north-south axis of the continents themselves, on how these first Americans developed civilizations. The two regions that we're going to focus on for this discussion is going to be the civilizations that developed in Mesoamerica. This is an area that stretches from the arid highlands of central Mexico and down south through the jungles to the Yucatan Peninsula and into Central America, around where modern day Guatemala is. And the second area we're going to take a look at is a narrow strip of land along the northwestern coast of South America, in where modern day Peru is, that encompasses portions of the Andes Mountains along with the coast. So, as I said, geography is going to play a role here, no exception as with any other civilizations. And so let's take a look at these two areas we're going to talk about, Mesoamerica and the western portion of South America, and look at them in turn. Mesoamerica civilizations tended to rise in either the highlands or the lowlands there of central Mexico. Central and western Mexico contains high plateaus with cool valleys, very popular regions in which to settle. And then to the east and south of that, you have grasslands and steamy tropical forests. You're going to have civilizations form in both of these, but you're never going to have one civilization form in both at the same time, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to have separate civilizations that will exist in both at the same time. As a matter of fact, you are going to see that there'll be abundant trade between some of these civilizations as they overlap, right? Um, but when you take a look at like some of the most prized items of these individual cultures, you'll tend to find them exclusively in that region where they developed, right? These are things like obsidian and cocoa and things like that, right? Now, all of these cultures in Mesoamerica are going to feature some common elements. For example, they're going to grow crops, they're going to use animals that are relatively similar with each other, despite whether being in the highlands or in the lowlands. They're going to use glyph forms of writing. They are going to build temple-topped pyramids. They're going to be pyramid builders. They're going to use calendars that are all of kind of a similar format. They're going to play a ball game that has religious overtones to it. They'll practice human sacrifice, and they'll use cocoa or cocoa beans as a form of currency, right? And then finally, they'll worship a plethora of different gods, including a Google-eyed water deity and also often a feathered serpent god. In Peru, you're going to also see two distinct cultural or climatic regions form. You're going to have the western slopes of the Andes that are going to form a dry desert-like region, not really suited for intensive agriculture, but with ample access to the Pacific Ocean, and it's abundant fishing, and so therefore you're going to have a very fish-based culture developed there. And then in the high mountains and plateaus on the eastern slopes of the Andes, you're going to have regions that receive a lot of moisture from the prevailing Amazon winds, and therefore you're going to have intensive agriculture and farming of things like corn and beans and potatoes and things like that, right? Just like in Mesoamerica, in this Peruvian region of South America, you're going to have a vibrant trade develop between these highland people and the low coastal land people, right? You're going to see evidence of trade of things like fish and shells and corn and potatoes and things like that, right? You'll also see similarities between these highland and lowland peoples. Like, for example, they will both practice similar religious uh, practices, things like mummification of the dead, and also worshiping a prominent sun god. Now, civilizations in this region itself are going to develop about 5,000 years behind what you see in Asia and Europe. They're going to lag behind. And there's a lot of reasons for this. There's been a lot of theories put out on this. And so there's just some general things that all of them probably collectively play a role. First, first of all, we got to get back to that geography, right? That north-south axis orientation of the Americas makes it where certain technological advances do not travel as well. Farming, for example, when you develop agriculture and you develop a way to domesticate teosinte into maize, right into corn, then that teosinte maybe grows really good in the central Mexico area in the temperate zones. But if you move down closer to, say, the equator, where modern day Colombia is, doesn't grow as well. Or if you go up north into modern day Canada, it's not going to grow as well, right? And so that means in order for you to grow it in the southern regions, you're going to have to cross temperate zones to get there. That north-south axis actually stymies the movement of technology. Whereas in Asia and Europe, you have an east-west axis, and you're not crossing temperate zones. You also have the fact that, like I said, there's no cereal grains, right? 50% of all the calories consumed by humans today are cereal grains of some form, right? And so you don't have these sources of domesticated cereals there at the time. You do have grains, you do have, sorry, not grains, you do have corn that develops there, right? Maize, and you do have squash and beans and things like that, but not the cereal grains, right? And then finally, and this probably plays a large role, there are no large domesticated animals, right? Of the large mammals on Earth, only 5 of them have proven to be really well suited to domestication, and that's cows, sheep, goats, pigs, and horses, or some, variants of those, right? Of these 5, all 5 of them are found in Europe and Asia. You are not finding any of them indigenous to North or South America, right? So they don't have that. In South America, you have one marginally useful domesticatable animal, the llama, but outside of that, you just have dogs, guinea pigs, not very useful. As a matter of fact, it might explain why the development of the wheel in the Americas was slower, right? You don't have this large domesticated animal to do labor that might require you to develop something like some kind of cart for it to pull that would have wheels that would help it to roll and move more freely, right? And so you have that a slowness in developing things like that, probably for that reason. Now, as a side note on that, when you finally have these two continents reunite, right? When you start having, in our case, European culture starts to interact with the Americas again, one of the other advantages of domesticatable large animals is that they tend to carry a lot of diseases that get passed on to humans, and so through generations of that you develop certain degrees of I don't want to say disease immunity, but at least disease resistance. And so when these two continents are rejoined, these first Americans are not going to have the resistance to some of humanity's major killers, right? Things like smallpox and influenza and tuberculosis, malaria, even things like the plague, right? They've never been exposed to this because they never had the large domesticated animals in which they were in close proximity to these potential diseases.